Hi, everyone. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes. I just want to make sure that we're all here and everything is good. Hi, Sergio. Okay. Welcome, everyone, to this webinar on how to unleash your intuition. And it's especially important topic for me because it's something that I grew up with all of my life. If you recall, going back in, historically to when my father started to research the Silva Method, it went way, way back into the early 40s. By the time I was born, he had pretty well established all the content that he was going to present to the world at large. And so by the time I was of age to understand and learn, it had to have been at least 16 years after he started his initial programming, and about maybe 10 years before he actually offered it to the world. So I was at a perfect, young age to be able to capture so much information and be part of some of the experimentation that he did with children. And of course, he worked with his children first. And all that he studied and discovered, and how he discovered through his studies a process of how to develop intuition. He always went by the fact that he was so sure of, that everybody was intuitive. We're sentient beings. And of course, because of that, we have an ability to sense information beyond our physical senses. And yes, there are rapid processes of the brain that in some scientific circles, or all scientific circles, say that lead to intuition, because we have so much stored information through all our experiences and throughout our life, that information can be quickly accessed in a matter of an instant, to be able to use that information for solving problems or making choices, correct choices and decisions. But intuition, and the way he approached it, that some scientists would call more woo-woo like, would be more based on something beyond that. That too, obviously, but something even beyond that. And he believed very strongly, as I do, that it is a potential, a human potential that everybody has. Everybody is born with potential, in the same way that everyone is born with potential to read. But not everybody reads in the same level, or reads in the same quality, I guess you could say. Same thing seems to apply with intuition. Intuition is a potential that we all have to develop, to better, to enhance. And what my father discovered was the process, a perfect, wonderful process as to how to develop and strengthen your intuition, where you can come to rely on it as much as you do on your physical senses, and for making decisions, and for solving problems, and to better your life in every way. And quite frankly, the better your decisions and choices are, the better your life is going to be. Good decisions lead to a good life. Great decisions lead to a great life. And a lot of times we don't have the available information right there before us in order to make those quick, on the spot decisions or choices, and we need to rely on something other than our physical senses, and that's where your intuition, your gut feeling, your sixth sense, so to speak. I would say your ultimate sense comes in, but it needs to be trained. It needs to be developed. And so, what my father created was a process that is called subjective education. It's a way where we can begin to educate ourselves as to how we discern information that we perceive with our mental senses. Now, I've said many a times that our mental senses are the senses that are true to our nature as spirit beings having a human experience. The spirit part of you is a greater part of you. It involves your mind, your intellect, your intelligence. It involves your emotions, your the spirit part, your soul. It involves everything. The physical part that are associated to your physical senses involves the physical body. That's it. And they have extreme limitations because you can only hear so much. You can only see a certain frequency. You can only smell what's in your environment. You can only touch what's at arm's reach. I mean, so we have great limitations when it comes to what we can see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. And to taste, you have to put it in your mouth. But with your mental senses, there are no limitations. There are no limitations of time and or space. You have no barriers whatsoever as to where you can project your intelligence and your mental senses to find information that you need to solve problems or to make those quick processes of your brain to make a quick on the spot decision or choice. Your mental senses are free to roam into the past, anywhere in the present, anywhere into the future. Your mental senses can roam into the microcosm, into the subatomic particle dimension or atomic dimension, or the molecular or cellular or organic or system dimension, or you can go out into the macrocosm, into other planets or systems, or out into space. You have no boundaries. All you need is to have a bit of memory and understanding of these things and a lot of imagination, and then discern how you perceive information with what you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell with your amazing mental faculties. But the thing is that nobody ever taught us how to do this. This is not something that we learn in school. We don't go to our educators and are educated through formal education as to how to use our mental senses in the same way that we were educated from the time that almost we were born to be able to discern information with what we were perceiving with our physical senses. There was a time that we didn't know the difference between one color or the other, the kind of vibration or frequency that entered our eyes. We just didn't know how to label them or discern them. We might be pointing or have someone pointed to a color red, and we would call it blue or black or brown or green until one day it dawns on us, oh, this is how my eyes perceive the color red. And once that knowledge enters your awareness and is impressed on your brain cells, forever the rest of your life, you know that that color will be red. And the other one is blue, and that one is black, and that one is green, without a doubt. You didn't always know how to make the difference or discern the difference between maybe boiling water and steam coming out of boiling water, or just a condensation of your breath as it touched freezing cold air, or smoke as it came out from a cigarette or from your mouth. I mean, they all look similar as to a child, inexperienced child, but within a short period of time, it was very, very evident that one thing was going to be steam, the other one was condensation, the other one was smoke. So it's that subtle distinction between one aspect of something, a look, a feel, an appearance of something versus another and the other. It's making those comparisons. It's making those comparisons with colors, with your physical senses. It was making those comparisons in between your mom saying, Laura, come over, or say, Laura, come here. It's very different. We noticed, that although your mother or parent could be using similar words, the tonality was different. The volume might have been different. the force of the wording might have been different. And so there was a difference that made the difference, that we learned then how to discern that one was sweet and kind, and the other one was probably meant that I was going to get scolded for doing something. This kind of education continued for the rest of our life and continues today onward. We're constantly making points of reference with our physical senses because those points of reference allow us to navigate in the physical world. If it wasn't because of those points of reference, you wouldn't leave your home. You wouldn't go from the downstairs to the upstairs as a baby when you were crawling. You wouldn't start going from one room to the other when you start walking all over the place. You wouldn't move from a tricycle to a bicycle with training wheels, and then to a bicycle with no training wheels, to a motorbike, to a car, to an airplane, to a rocket that takes you out of this planet and brings you right back. So it's these points of reference that allow us to navigate effectively in the physical world. But those aren't your greatest senses. Your greatest senses are those that are true to your real nature, which is you being a spirit being. And these other senses, your mental senses, which are intangible, so we don't seem to value them as much as our more tangible physical senses, because I can feel things, I can smell things, it's very tangible. Unlike your mental senses, they're more intangible. You need to start to learning how to discern and make sense of what you perceive with your mental senses. And so again, we were never taught how to do this. We were never told how valuable these senses are in decision making and problem solving. We were never explained that value because our educators and our parents didn't know this either. So I'm one of the lucky ones, and I think all of us in our family, that were trained from a very young age how to discern those qualities of our perceptions with our we're perceiving with our mental senses, and be able to make that distinction between one thing and the other thing. And that's the process that I mentioned we call subjective education. When you go through this process of educating yourself as to how to discern this information that you perceive with your mental senses, what can't you do? What problem can't you solve? In fact, you can solve any problem because you will go anywhere you need to go in order, whether it's past, present, or future, or whether it's going to be microcosm, macrocosm, to find the needed information. And need is a very important quality to pay attention to, because when there's a need, you will find a way to solve that need. When you have to do something, there's not another option. You've got to do the right thing. You've got to do it right from the very beginning. And that's what we want to always do, because the more decisions and choices that you make that are accurate and correct, the more problems you solve, the more successful you will become. Just imagine where your life would be today if you hadn't made all the right choices and decisions. Where would you be living? What would you be doing? Who would you be with? Would you be married to the person you're married today? How much money would you be earning? How much education would you have had? Where would you, how much would you, I mean, just it's everything. Everything you do is about choices and decisions. And had you make the right choice all the time, your life would be very, very, very different today. And so, again, this is a very important thing that we want to look at. And one of the reasons why my father called it the ultimate sense, because if you really evolved and enhance your intuition, and you became very skillful at discerning this information, you would have it all. And you would have happiness and the health, because you'd be able to sense what's going on in your body or in your loved one's body, and you would be able to detect that information and then act upon it so that we can prevent an illness or prevent things from getting more serious, or return things back into a healthy state. You would be able to pick the right stocks, choose the right spouse, buy the right house at the right amount of money. It's endless. It's what you can do with a heightened intuition. So what we do in the Silva method is that we begin by going through many mental exercises that a lot of practitioners, Silva practitioners, call work, because for the first time in their life, they're putting their imagination to use in such an extensive way. Now, to my father, the intuition part of the Silva method, which comes at the very end, for him, that was the heart and soul of the Silva Method. Yes, the first parts of the Silva Method, which we used to call day 1 out of 4 days, control relaxation to manage stress and learn mind body management techniques and formula type techniques. And then day 2 was a general self improvement where you learn techniques like to get rid of headaches and to use a mental screen to be able to get rid of pain, to use the glass of water technique, to have dream control. And then you also before that had sleep control and all that kind of stuff. That was training for the intuition building. He felt it was that important that he spent an extensive amount of time to develop your mind abilities, to be able to have more self-mind control, to be able to evolve and develop your visualization and your imagination, to be able to picture things and to feel things and to focus on your internal dialogue so that we could experience everything, whether it's visually or auditorily or kinesthetically. I mean, he put a lot of time and effort in you being trained to use your mind in a very effective way. And in the process, yes, improve the quality of your living experience by making your health better, relaxing, solving problems, and being able to do all kinds of wonderful, positive things. So once you have gone through the first day and the second day in the training, which is a Silva Life system, then came the third day. That was magic for me. The third day, I mean, it's all magic for me, but the third day was really special. That was called ESP. That's what it was called, but it didn't stand for extrasensory perception. For him, it was effective sensory projection because he very much believed, and he showed it to everyone who took the program, that you can effectively project your senses, as I said, beyond time and space and be able to perceive information, bring that information back, and apply it to solving problems of all kinds. And the process was done mostly in that third day called effective sensory projection. So, what the process involves is that we begin with not so complicated matter that we're familiar with, and it was important for him or for us to use as students to use things that were very common to us and that we were very comfortable with and had a relationship with to some degree. We had a memory with this information, we had experienced it in some way or another in our lifetime, and he started with more simple matter simply because he thought the simple matter, which is things that are inanimate in nature, that have a foundation of energy, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules, that radiated less energy than more complicated forms of matter, including life matter, that it was more difficult to detect. So he starts off with the more challenging things in our training, and then makes it easier and easier, but we build more and more confidence. And so we start off with things like different metals: stainless steel, copper, brass, and lead. Now, stainless steel, copper, brass, and lead, we've been around all our lives. And so we start to experience these types of matter and metals in our life in all forms, whether it's working with our computer, whether it's utensils we utilize for cooking and for eating, whether it's the vehicles that we ride in or the planes that we fly in. This doesn't matter. No matter what it is, we have inanimate matter all around us. And so we have a lot of history, a lot of objective physical points of reference that we have already established with our experience with all these kinds of metals that have been around in our life. So a lot of the intuitive process is going to involve memory, having a memory of something, having a personal experience, having a rapport with that matter from a physical perspective is important because that memory together with your imagination is what's going to allow you to build on your intuition. And then little by little, we use more imagination and less memory, and then more imagination and more intuition. And then we make comparative studies along the way. We have different kinds of tests, if you will, or examinations of this matter at different ways. For example, we start off with, let's say, stainless steel. We all have had experiences with stainless steel. And stainless steel, if we were to hold it in our hands and make a physical impression, we know it has a certain density. We know it has a certain temperature from an outer perspective. We know if we bring the steel to our nose, we know it has a certain smell. And we can use that information, that knowing. And it's really important to focus on the feeling of knowing that you know you're right. We know what stainless steel smells like. We've smelled it many, many times. We know that stainless steel is dense and heavy. We know that it's kind of cold in the sense, and we know the color of it from this outer perspective. But that memory is what allows us to go into, with our imagination, into the stainless steel. Now, what I found was very genius about the process of subjective education my father developed was that he gave us a lot of mind tools to work with that would make it easier for us to maneuver ourselves in the subjective world and be able to perceive information and make it easier for us to perceive information. So I'll give you an example. For example, if you were to project yourself into the metal, and we would do that simply by in our meditation, imagining going through the process of of re-impressing ourselves with an imaginary piece of stainless steel, much the same way we had done physically in the classroom. So before the mental exercises, we always make physical impressions of what we're going to examine from a mental or subjective point of view. So we make the physical impressions first. We get the real actual piece of stainless steel. We hold it, we look at it, we weigh it, we smell it, and we touch it to our forehead, the physical stainless steel. That's what we do in the classroom. Then in the meditation, we replay all those motions, but mentally. So we extend our arms out, imagine the imaginary piece of stainless steel, and we kind of go through the process. We smell it, we kind of weigh it, and then we put it to our forehead and allow this to be our entrance into the stainless steel. Now, what I really enjoyed about this is that you could use these mind tools. For example, the finger snapping device. He said, if you go into the stainless steel and you feel you can barely fit in it, that means you haven't gone very deep into the different dimensions that the mind allows you to perceive. So, what can you do? You can make the steel so big by snapping the fingers of your right hand and make it go bigger, 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 as big as a big room, as big as a huge building, as big as our planet. And then imagine your size in contrast to that from the subjective perspective. Now, what can you experience? If you can barely fit in it, what can you experience there? And then when the metal is you imagine to be as big as a planet in your size and contrast, what's different? Are you now picturing molecules? Are you picturing atoms? Are you imagining subatomic particles because you've never seen them, but you have an idea in your mind, a representation in your mind that is accurate for you? It doesn't matter if it's accurate for the other person. It doesn't matter at all. It only matters that this is how your brain and mind, how your mental senses, how your intelligence perceives this level of, and this depth of that matter. And to you, if you say, wow, this is a subatomic dimension, or this is the atomic dimension, oh, wow, this is what molecules look like to me, then that's accurate for you. And you make a point of reference. So if you wanted to make yourself smaller and instead of the metal bigger, then you could snap the fingers of your left hand and imagine yourself going smaller, 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 and see how you use a lot of imagination there. And as you make yourself teeny, 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 tiny, in contrast to the metal, then now what can you see? What can you observe? It's not seen, but it's an observation with your mental senses. What are you experiencing? And when you're there, then we can do various tests. For example, how much light do you sense? What's the color of light? What's the intensity of light? And it doesn't matter what it is that you perceive. Whatever it is that you do perceive, that is a point of reference for you. It doesn't matter again if it's totally different than the person next to you. It has not means nothing. It only what only means something is how you perceive it, and that's what it means to you. Then you say, well, what's the odor like in stainless steel? Well, you have an idea as to how it smells like physically, but now as you're inside the matter itself, is the odor the same? Kind of take a whiff and see what's the difference that makes the difference between the subjective experience versus the objective experience? Those comparisons is what's going to help you to discern information and be able to apply that information effectively in the future. And then what's the density of the material? You can imagine like you're knocking inside the metal and see what sound is reflected back to you, and you get an idea, wow, this is pretty dense. Does it sound like that? Does it sound like that? Does it sound like, I mean, what does it sound like? I mean, it, depending on the sound, you could, God, this is really dense or this is not very dense at all. So you're going to go through these tests, light and intensity of light and color of light, the odor, and then the density of material depending on the what you perceive. It's its density from that perspective. And those are points of reference that you make with your mental senses. So you're making points of reference with what you're picturing, with color, that's something that you would observe with your physical eyes, but now you're doing it with your mind's eyes. You're observing sound when you're having the reflective sound. You're observing odors, which is very, very connected to flavors. So see, hear, smell, touch, and taste. And then, of course, you're utilizing the mental senses in a very similar way, but in a subjective examination. Then when you come out of the metal, you are able to release it, let it go. And then we do other things that are helpful by imagining different color backgrounds, just to have comparisons, a lot of comparisons, a lot of mental visual work, imagination at work. And then after that, we move on to comparing that metal to another metal. So we start with stainless steel and then brass, and brass is similar. It looks basically this, same, but it has a different color. Maybe it's not as heavy when you hold a piece of brass compared to a piece of stainless steel in your hands, a physical piece. You'll notice distinctions physically. But when you go into the brass, now you can make observations that are done with your mental senses, subjectively, mentally. Then the idea is to go through the same exams over and over. We use 4 different metals: stainless steel, brass, copper, and lead. And then notice the subtle distinctions between one experience and the other experience, between one metal and the other metal. And so we do that. Then when we go to the third metal, we compare the third metal with the second and the first, and the fourth metal with the third, second, and fourth. And noticing what is the difference that makes the difference, that allows me to know that if I'm in this subjective environment, I know that I'm in stainless steel, or I know that I'm inside copper or brass or lead. And this is the knowing, the feeling of knowing, that is very important for you to lock into. That is why it's so important that we first start off with memory, things that we have memory with. And then with our imagination, we kind of expand on that memory because we're free to do so with our imagination, and now observe it from a subjective point of view. And as you're making these points of reference, you're educating yourself as to how you perceive information, how you perceive matter that is comprised of energy, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules. And once you know how you perceive inanimate matter, even though these are metals, then you have a rapport. You have established a relationship with all matter, because all matter throughout the universe consists of energy, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules, including you. It is a part of your foundation, of your the way you're constituted. You have a level of energy, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules. So you naturally have a rapport with this matter, but now you're building a greater rapport because you're building more of a relationship with matter that has these different levels and depths of its existence. And it's really interesting to notice how, although there's just a few levels of energy radiation, again, subatomic particles, atoms, and molecules, the idea to my father was that because there were so few levels of radiation, it was probably more challenging to perceive information that was indicative of inanimate matter than it would be of plant life, animal life, or human life. So once we do those tests with inanimate matter, we move up the ladder of complexity. And so we now then begin to experience life matter. And so we move into, to make it easy in our education, our subjective education, we move into plant life. So we select a couple of different plants, and we get a leaf from two different plants, and then we study the leaf from an external point of view, and then we then examine it from an internal point of view. Again, we go through a different test of light, intensity of color, of odor, and density of material, and we compare now life matter compared to inanimate matter. And it's really a very interesting distinction, because now you know that it has a different density from a physical perspective, a different odor, that chlorophyll odor. It has a different color. You can look through it and see the light going through it, and you see all these little veins. And we can see all that and experience all that from a physical perspective. But once you go into the leaf, and you make it larger, 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 or yourself smaller, 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 how does it change what you're perceiving with your mind senses? And then how does that compare to inanimate matter? How does life express itself to you, to your brain and mind, and to your intelligence? How does cell life, how does just that energy that we call life, and primary perception, and all that comes along with it, how does that express itself to you? And how does your relationship to life matter, like such as plants, different than inanimate matter? And again, it's quite interesting to go through the process, and it is a lot of mental work. And people are often a little exhausted when we're done for the day, but it's a well worth experience to go through. And then we compared the first leaf to all the first of the four metals, and notice the difference that makes the difference, the subtle difference that makes the difference to you, that lets you know, now I'm inside a plant. I'm inside plant life. I can tell because I've had this experience before. I know what it looks like. I know what it smells like. I know how much color enters here. I know the temperature as well. And the temperature is another test that we do. And then we get a different leaf, and we make a comparative study between the first leaf and the second leaf, and notice the subtle distinctions. They're both leaves, they're both plant life, yet they're different at some level. So, what's the difference that makes the difference to you? So, the idea is to be able to really pinpoint those subtle distinctions that become very evident through time, and allow you to know what you are experiencing, and it's a valid and it's a real experience. And you can literally perceive this information, and if it's valuable for you, to be applied to solving problems. A lot of people have utilized a similar processes naturally to discover oil underground, for example, or minerals, valuable minerals, or metals, and that are under the ground. And many people have a very strong rapport to inanimate matter. I know people who work with computers, and they love computers, and they work with them all the time. And your computer breaks down, you take it to them to get fixes, and you tell them, my computer breaks down all the time. And they say, well, let me check. Let me see. And nothing happens. It never breaks down with them. They have a great relationship with them. And apparently, it's a different rapport they have with that matter based on their experience with that matter, such as people who really like to work with plants. There's a story of George Washington Carver that he would look at the peanut and would say, what good are you? What what other goods, or what other ways can we utilize you? And I think he found over 100 different applications of the peanut, things that we're very familiar with, and things that we might not be so familiar with. But many times you just need to kind of make a connection, and make a connection with those things that you are either working with or have a lot of experience with, and you build a very strong rapport. So again, it's really interesting to notice what's the difference that makes the difference between one type of matter and the other type of matter, and make those distinctions, because that's how you begin to educate your mental senses and discern information in a very accurate way, so that you can apply this information to helping you in solving problems of that kind. Now, when it moves on to continue with the training process, then we move into working with animal life. Now, animal lives don't only have energy, subatomic particles, atoms, molecules, and cells like in plant life, but they also have tissues and organ systems and biological intelligence. And there's a lot more radiating out of an animal, a pet of yours, or any animal that exists, and that allows us to have a greater rapport with animal life to some degree, because we also have all those things within us. And so we have a rapport with inanimate matter. We have a natural rapport with animate matter, with plant life. We have a very natural and stronger rapport with animal life. And of course, we continue to establish points of reference in that way. So we usually start that study by selecting an animal that we're familiar with. If you have well, we recommend a pet like a dog or a cat or your neighbor's pet, because it's easier to work with that type of an animal versus a snake or a lizard or something of that nature. Although you can, but a dog and a cat is more in rapport with our body type in a sense than would be a lizard or a snake or something, a snail or something like that, an insect of any kind. So, anyways, that's a recommendation, but you're free to explore whatever you want. But in the process, when you go within the animal, or when you're studying the animal, you can study it from an outer perspective and make points of reference now with your mental senses, but with a subjective senses, that much like you have with your physical senses. We know what an animal's fur feels like. I used to have a dog, an Australian Shepherd, and I knew what his fur felt like. I knew what his character the face was. I knew he had these beautiful bright eyes, and he had these happy ears, and he had a beautiful face, and I could hold him. I could just look at him. But I do the same thing from a subjective perspective. I look at my pet and I just hold him and I just kind of, play with his fur and look at his eyes and his happy face and his, ears and everything. And I could just bring that memory back in. And then once I do that, I can project into, by just desiring to do so, into the next level, the skull, project into the different organs, into the brain, the eyes, or into the ears. If they have ear infections, sometimes you might pick it out. And the idea here is that at any level with any kind of matter, if you detect a problem, then follow your intuition. Whether you might be right or you might be wrong, doesn't matter. But you always want to follow your gut feeling and your intuition that something might be wrong. So let me imagine it returning back to perfect functioning. And that can happen with something that's inanimate, that can happen with plants, it can happen with animals, and most certainly can also happen with human beings. And so this type of psychic means just mind. So this type of psychic mental exploration allows you to establish points of reference with your mental senses using imagination and some memory, of course, because we've all seen pictures or a chart in anatomy books of our pets and of human beings, of plants, I mean, of all kinds of things. And so we have some kind of memory of that, and yet we can then explore how your intelligence now perceives this type of matter from a subjective perspective, educating yourself as to how you sense information with your mind. And we continue to establish these types of points of reference as to how the animal functions, how the body functions, how the heart beats, and might feel the heart beating and picture it beating, how the lungs expand and contract, how everything seems to be operating within your animal or your pet's body. And we call that kind of like scanning. So we're scanning inside and we're scanning from the outside. We can turn the body around. We have all kinds of flexibility here. You can make your pet really large to focus in on maybe just the hip joint, or you can make it really small to hold your pet in your hands and just observe how healthy or not so healthy your pet looks, so you can have a sensing. Now, a lot of times I'm going like this sensing, kind of like as if I was picking up information with my hands, which does happen to a lot of people. Sometimes if you're very kinesthetic in the outer world, your tendency may be that you're going to be very kinesthetic in the inner world as well with your mental senses. So you need to be very observant as to how you perceive information. Are you very visual? And some people say, I don't picture anything. I just know. I have a dialogue in my head. Check the heart, check the ear, go there, whatever. And it's this dialogue, because they're very auditory, that is guiding them as to what is going on with what they're perceiving. Other people are very kinesthetic. I'm very kinesthetic and I am visual, but I've learned to develop all three modalities as to how to perceive information both objectively and subjectively. So ideally, you want to have a clearer experience, a clear, intuitive experience and perceptive experience by engaging yourself visually, auditorily, and kinesthetically. But do make a note of that, because you might lean more towards one than the other. So that's going to be important for us to look into. And the process continues. We continue to evolve using mind tools along the way to be able to sense information and be able to establish points of reference so that we can come to understand how to discern information, how we personally discern information that we're perceiving with our mental senses. So when it comes to the human body and mind, we typically select someone that we know, whose face we can recall easily, and we observe them from an outer appearance as well, and then based on our memory, and then we study their face, their eyes, their nose, their ears, their mouth, the character of their face, and then we project ourselves into starting to the head area, going from the skull and then going into the brain and studying the different colors and the size, the shape, and just an exploration. How do you perceive this? And if, again, along the way, you perceive something that doesn't seem quite right to you, just imagine it always getting better and going back to health, back to health. You can raise the body up and then focus on the chest, then go into the heart area, or study the bones, or study the muscles, the tendons, whatever it is that you want to study and establish points of reference with your experience. By the time we get done with that day one, pretty much, which is called effective sensory projection, then we have established hundreds upon hundreds of points of reference as to how we see, hear, taste, and to smell from a psychic or subjective point of view. And we've made comparative studies, many hundreds of comparative studies from one type of matter to the next and next and next. And then we finalize this on day 4 with what we call AESP, or applied effective sensory projection, by literally working on cases. We call case studies or case working. And we work in groups of 2 or 3, and different people, or everyone brings names of people that they know to the case working session that have health challenges, serious health challenges. They don't tell anybody about it. They just have it written down. And it's important to have it written down because you have actual, evidence to back up, what the psychic is perceiving while they're in a meditation, sensing information. And how this works, basically, and you probably have gone through this already, and maybe you already know, is that, let's say I'm going to be the orientologist, or the person who orients or guides the psychic into the psychic investigation. So I come into the case working session with names of people that I know need help. And I ask those people, is it okay if I bring it in? Do you mind if we send you some healing energy? And they usually say, yeah, I know what to do. That's fine with me. All the help I can get is going to be welcomed. So I usually do get that permission anyways. And so then I guide the person into a meditation. And then I tell them, at the count of 3, I'm going to present the image of the body. It's just the image of the body of such and such a person, lives in this location, male or female, and the age. Now, 1, 2, 3. And the psychic is to imagine on their mental screen this person, however they appear. Some people are very visual and they say, oh gosh, this person's got a heavier body, they're gray haired, and they seem to be limping, but let me look into that. And they can describe the person very, very clearly. Other people use another mind tool we call the helmet technique, where they imagine superimposing that person's head over their own and imagine that they're experiencing that person through their perspective, as if they were them. Their eyesight's not very good. I can tell they're having problems with their sinus, or they can't breathe. They have a hearing problem, whatever. And they're able to test their senses by superimposing that person's head over their own, and as if they were them, and experience from their perspective. Can they move easily? Are they having problems moving? Do they have pain in their body? And some people are very kinesthetic, and they might feel pain and even point to their bodies in that sense. It's quite interesting. It's a fascinating practice session. And so then you let them talk and investigate the body by scanning the body, sensing areas of greatest attraction, making it bigger, going into it and finding out, well, what about this area calls my attention? I think the heart's not operating quite well, or the pancreas, or whatever comes to mind. And so they make this investigation, and it's usually done quickly, because the more time you spend on it, and you stay quiet and you take too long, you allow logic to come in, and logic has really very little role to play in your psychic perceptions and in your intuition, and how you do this kind of psychic investigation for the purpose of establishing points of reference. And if you sense something, you make corrections, and you return things back to a healthy state in your mind, hoping that that's what we're going to encourage in the body itself. And so we do this kind of working sessions that you can at any time do it yourself. And there's actually a website that I think it's a graduate from the Connecticut area put together, and it's called silvacases.com. And it asks you to enter, a certain passcode. And the password is level, because you use the 3-2-1 method to enter level. And when you enter the password, then it opens up as to how many cases do you want. So you're allowed to go there, and you're able to select people's names and where they live and their age and their gender, so that you on your own can work on the case and see what you perceive. Then you open your eyes, make sure you write down everything you remember that you perceived of that person or persons, and then you go back to the website and you click for information or feedback, and then it tells you what's wrong with them, and that way you can make a comparison as to if you detect it accurately or not accurately. Now, don't be disillusioned. That's a big mistake people make, that they think, oh, I got it all wrong. That's okay. Make a point of reference of how you perceive erroneous information, because it's a very different feeling that you experience when you perceive wrong information versus accurate information. It's very subtle distinction. It's a subtle difference between one and the other. But once you recognize it, like when you say, oh, that's a color red, and I know it's red for the rest of my life. Once you recognize the sensations attached to one experience or the other, you say, well, wait a minute, that's inaccurate. Let me go with this information instead, this feeling instead. And it becomes very predominant in you. And so it's just as important to sense information that's not accurate as it is to sense information that is accurate. So once you are able to make comparisons as to what is actually wrong with the person based on what you're perceiving or what you perceive, then you go back into your meditation, you make those points of reference, and you send healing or correction. It's a really wonderful tool to have. So you have a lot of tools to work with. You have the helmet technique, you have the finger snapping technique, you have another technique of going back into time. If you want to go back in time, let's say someone had an accident and they had a broken bones, and you focus and you picked up this person's got a broken leg. Well, let me see when that happened. You put your hand like this, as if it's a face of a clock, and you go back in time as you focus on the fracture. And as you go back in time, you may say this is 1 year, 2 years, and then by the third year it goes away. You might go forward in time and really decide, oh yeah, it was 2 years and 3 months ago, more or less, I sense that this person had this accident. So that's a time mechanism device that allows you to have more control of what you are perceiving when you're working with these particular at this particular level. And so as you develop your points of reference with your mental senses, and this is something you can do every day of your life. Which road do I take? What elevator is going to open? Who's calling me right now on the phone? And if you guess it before you answer, and it is that person, you go, whoa, great, point of reference. That's how it feels for you to sense accurately. And you can do this every single day of your life and continue to build and build and build on these subjective points of reference. Now, in the training, in the Silva training, yes, we go really extensive into the body and the thinking process and emotionally and all that kind of stuff. And that may matter to you, and it may not make that much difference. But generally, when you have your mental senses developed and you're able to really fine tune that, you have a sense of knowing that you might not be particularly in favor or want to investigate a person's body from the inside, but you might want to when it's your loved one and they're really, really sick in the hospital. I mean, that happened to me with my husband. I mean, I literally feel like I probably helped save his life because I was able to determine and to sense what was going on in his body. And when I told the doctors, they didn't believe me. They didn't believe me. And they kept, denying me and almost got angry at me. And at the end, they said, well, let's look over here. And sure enough, that's what it was. I'm not a nurse, but I'm someone who is madly in love with my husband. Not madly, cancel that. Who is wonderfully in love with my husband. But my sister Isabel, she was a nurse. She was a nurse anesthetist. She used to use this every single day of her working life because she would prepare herself before the operations to make sure that she was prepared for whatever might come up. And there was many times that she sensed that something was going to happen, and it did. And she was already ready for it, and the doctors were ready for it. In fact, the doctors would ask her, can you scan the patient's body? Have you scanned it already before we do the? And she says, all done, we're good, kind of thing. So there's great value in this. There's tremendous value. You always have a sense, a gut feeling, a nudging. That's your intuition guiding you as well. Your body's very perceptive. Your mind is very perceptive. Your intelligence is very perceptive. I mean, there's many reasons why you're so sensitive. You have these mental senses that can pick up information willfully, not just by chance, but it's more effective when you train those senses as to discern what they're sensing. That way you'll know, I'm going to make this decision. I know what that person's I know what those that person's intentions are, and I'm not going to go do business with this guy. I'm going to buy this stock because it's, I feel, I sense, I know this is going to be a good stock to buy. Or I'm going to go into this job offer because this job offer, I have a feeling, I knowing that it's the best thing for me. Although this one might pay more, this is where my future is going to be. And let's face it, some of our decisions, they can change your life for decades, decades. And you know that. And so when you have the ability to have that sensing, that knowing that what you're deciding, the choices you're making are good ones and accurate ones, when you feel something in your body goes, you know what, I need to follow up on this, and you kind of go into it, and you're working with yourself. You can even go to your doctor and say, can you check on this? Because I have an interesting different sensation or whatever. And really, some of your self-diagnoses are going to be accurate. And when you're able to do this, you can do so many more wonderful things, heal yourself, help, in the healing process of your loved ones. You can help, your not only yourself, but others close to you, your family members, in making the also better choices and decisions. There's so many things to do. And every day of your life, you have the opportunity to use your mental senses, develop your intuition more effectively, and use it as a real, reliable source of information that has no boundaries of time or space. With that, what can't you do? I think you've heard me say before that a long lost friend of ours who passed away some years ago, Harry McKnight, who was really my father's right hand man back in the early 60s when my father started presenting the Silva Method worldwide. He would say, when you have a way of going forward and backward in time, as we can with our mental senses, because that's a quality of being an eternal and infinite. When you go forward and backward in time and you perceive information of all kinds, that's a quality of being omniscient. When you can do this and you get this information and you apply it to solving problems of all kinds, that's a quality of being omnipotent. And when you can seemingly create something out of nothing, that's a quality of being omnificent. Infinite, eternal, omniscient, omnipotent, omnificent. Who are you? He would go on to say, because whoever you are, you and higher power, our creator, higher intelligence, God, are related. And that really always, even to this day, makes me feel emotional just to know that we have that spark of source energy that guides us, that I am presence within us, that has its own set of senses that when are developed and we know how to discern that information, everything is in our hands that for us to enjoy. And I think it's really, I mean, one of the reasons why my father called this a heart and soul of the Silva Method, and one of the reasons why it is the ultimate sense. And I know we're coming close to a closing time, so I want to look into some of the questions that might be here. A lot of really, yeah, Christina says practice. This should be taught in schools as we were growing up. And I totally, totally agree. And if we have any experiences with ADHD people with the Silva Method, there's a lot of people who've come to the Silva Method that and children as well who've had these challenges. And it literally, I used to teach a lot of children's programs, and I used to have a lot of children with the similar challenges, and it really helped them to center, and it helped them to have more control of themselves. And also, I think recognizing how they themselves would learn information, how to focus and concentrate. That was always very important for the children. So I think it's very valuable as well. Is this one course or is more than one course? Sergio, this intuition course is usually what we have in the Silva intuition training. It's very effective. And in fact, it's so important that we just now, I'm still doing the final touches on a program that for me is going to be one of my favorite, which is the intuition intensive marathon. And I'll be guiding you for 4 weeks, just to doing the points of reference every day with different things, and just to sharpen your ability to utilize and rely on your mental senses. And that's coming up like very soon. So keep an eye out for that. So the Silva intuition training focuses on this, but it's really better to have the foundation of Silva Life System, because that teaches you more of the mind management and the mind controls that are going to help you with your auditory kinesthetic and your visual abilities to sense information and work with your mind senses in that way. Then we have that John says that he remembers both me and my father well from Laredo. That's right. I'm still in Laredo. What if you're working alone? If you're working alone, you can still do it. Again, I mean, I work alone most times in this way. I go to silvacases.com. I get cases from there. Sometimes I just look at the things that come up in the news, and when I see someone who got hurt, then I project energy to them. I hear things that happen to a lot of people who end up in the hospital in the news as well sometimes, and I send them some healing energy, and I kind of sense if there's anything I can help them with. I mean, there's always things that you can do on your own, just so long as you have, of course, there's always the intention of helping somebody else get better and putting this into good work. How do we prepare in order to successfully unleash our intuition? I think the best preparation is going to be, again, to do your centering exercises, go through the formula type techniques and Silva Life System, only because they really give you a lot of secondary learnings as to how to work with your thoughts, the language, the voice in your head, how to work with your sensations, how to work with your visuals, which with what you visualize and imagine, how to manage your inner state, how to stay at alpha, that kind of stuff. But a lot of people go right into to Silva intuition and they have great success. So really, I think it's going to be kind of up to you as to how what all you want to prepare in order to unleash your intuition more successfully. And the intuition intensive is going to be also very, very helpful. So he goes, so psyched to catch you live, Laura. Thank you, Dragon. This is the year I'm focusing on developing my intuition. Yes, that's it. Good for you. And Kiana says, hello, please give us tips on how to do this without a partner. I think I have, and I'm hoping that you have enough tips. Again, the intuition intensive is going to be helpful. The still intuition training is helpful. The just working with what you perceive with your mental senses and doing those examinations on your own. Again, I do it all the time. What elevator doors going to open up? Do I take my umbrella? Do I not take my umbrella? Am I going to go this route or that route? Who should I call first today? Who's calling me on the phone? Oh, I get a feeling that someone, comes into my mind. I think, oh, you know what? Let me call just in case, kind of thing. I have a sister. My sisters are older than I am. I don't want to say elderly because they'll get angry if I say that. But I mean, I have family members I'm working on. I have aunts and uncles that I send healing energy to, and they will ask me, well, can you send me healing energy? What do you picture here? And things like that. I do want you to be very careful, though. Just be really careful as to how you utilize your intuition, especially in the beginning, because we're not always going to be accurate 100% of the time. Even the best intuitives or psychics are said to be 80% accurate in their best days and 20% inaccurate. So especially in the beginning, be very, very tactful, be very cautious, be very private about what you're sensing. And if you're ever going to relay information to somebody else, by all means, think about it twice, because not everybody's ready for this. There's ways of how to deliver information without scaring someone or saying something that might make a strong impression on them, because they're very impressionable, and you were wrong, and now they think, oh, something's wrong with me. So you want to be really careful until you're positive about how well you've developed your skill. I would say be very, very respectful of this practice. Okay. um let's see, about the mental screen. Dragon is asking, you go through a lot of stuff before getting up to the actual exercise, like points of reference, etc. Do we need to do this every single time? No. You can just go right into 3 to 1, or just 3 deep breaths, picture your mental screen. That's it. I mean, really, once you know where it is, and where the mental screen is, then you can just go right to it. Again, this depends on your level of practice. How much are you practicing? Are you familiar with the tools and techniques and the formula type techniques? The meditations are there to help install or imprint or program the information. But once it's programmed, then you are able to utilize it to fit your lifestyle and your needs. I'm one to go into a formal meditation as I'm entering sleep, and then as I wake up in the morning, I stay in bed a little bit, kind of go through my meditations. But throughout the day, I just go in and out as I need it, as I need the information, because I know where to go. I have a point of reference of that right mental state that I need to enter, that gives me the right kind of outcomes. And so again, it's up to you. Many times I just close my eyes, I picture what I need to on my mental screen, and then I step into the image of me having achieved the outcome of the goal, and I feel great, and that's enough. That's fine. But you need to discover that for yourself. Okay. Christina asked, do we do the same with family and friends? What about working on ourselves? Always. I mean, you always work on your family and friends and on yourself. I mean, that's the one thing I always do. I'm always scanning, especially if I know there's something going on with them in any way, physically or emotionally. And I always work on myself too. I mean, I work on myself as I'm running, I work on myself as I'm gardening, as I'm cooking, I'm sending healing energy to loved ones. And if I have a little kink in my back or whatever, I'm kind of like massaging it out. I'm separating my vertebrae. I'm making sure that everything is okay, and that everything's relaxed. And so always work on yourself. Let me see. Please help me with how to overcome mental blocks and OCD. Again, mental blocks are going to be more belief structured, because the mental block is something you have probably allowed to happen in your life, or has happened to your life. Maybe not because you allowed it, but because it was there. But as a child, it's more challenging to be able to avoid these things from happening. But if, as an adult, if you have a mental block about something, then you're aware of it. And so if you're aware of it, then what do you need to do to overcome it? Just awareness and mindfulness is going to make a huge difference on how you overcome mental blocks. And the more you keep telling yourself that you're OCD, then the more OCD you're going to be. So you might want to say, in the past I was OCD, but now I have better control of this situation in my life, and expect that control and self-control and inner controls to come about, because you're doing your meditations, you're concentrating more on things, you're doing your centering exercise, and you're really focusing on what the exercise is telling you to do. I mean, you're putting your mind and your brain to work. And your mind and your brain, when you put them to work in this way, at the alpha dimension, or at the alpha frequency, which is in the middle of the brain frequency spectrum, in most cases from 0 to 20, 21 cycles per second. And in the regular kind of brain frequency spectrum, 10 and a half is alpha. You're centering yourself. So you're not off centered. You're not eccentric. You're balanced and you're centered. So you're teaching your brain, this is where I want you to be most effective. So keep on practicing, because that's going to make a big difference. Let me see. Mind Valley. Oops. Anyways, thank you so much for your compliment. I really appreciate that. Um, Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And we're not doing seminars in Texas very much these days because of the situation, but we hope that we can resume that in the near future. Okay, let me see. And from Spain, buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Um, And then Vicky says, no sé cómo llegué aquí. And then he didn't know how he got here, but he would say hello to everybody. He's laughing about that. Can we use a soul mold for healing? Absolutely. The soul mold is meant for healing. That's a technique that you learn in the ultra. Don't confuse it with the ultimate or ultra mind. It's ultra seminar, the healing seminar, the dynamic healing seminar. You learn the soul mode, and the soul mode is just a space that you create that's on your mental screen, and it's the mold of a adult human being. And within that mold, you energize the entire mold from head, down the head and the neck, through the energy that you project outward from your third eye area, and you energize it all for health and goodness, all the good stuff. And then you imagine people facing you that you know are ill, moving into the mold and filling the mold completely. Even babies can be made to be larger and to fit the mold completely. And then you project energy again to the entire mold, keeping those people that you had in your mind and imagining them getting better and better and benefiting from this energy. It's a wonderful, wonderful tool that I would say millions throughout the world have learned to use. Okay. Buenas tardes, Adelia from New York. Buenas tardes. And Aisha, thank you. You're welcome. And then we have Dragon. Yes, Dragon, that's okay. If you leave that part, you have a lot of tools with Silva Life System and Silva Intuition and Silva Manifesting and Silva Dynamic Healing and all the things that we offer. You have a lot of tools that are going to be just as effective. And I'm here to guide you in our cottage group meetings. We have cottage group meetings once a month. So if you can join in, we cover a lot of information there as well. Let me see. God bless you too, Margaret. I really appreciate it. Um, and how do you sign up to be a case study? You can go to Silva Hotline. Wait, I think it's the Silva Helping Hotline on Facebook, and you can sign up there as well, or just write to us, and we'll take care of that. And then let me see. Thank you, Laura, for this. I have been using the Silva method for the past 4 years, and it has changed my life entirely. Yes, it fits perfectly with my entity. Very nice. Thank you very much for sharing that. And you're welcome, Ibrahim. Thank you, all of you. Thank you all so much for being part of this group and really for joining us here today. I hope that we can do this many, many more times to come. I look forward to it, and I'm here as your teacher, your mentor, your friend, as your family member. All right. So God bless you all. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, month, year, life. All right. Keep getting better. See y'all. Bye.